INCA, formed just over 10 years ago, has appointed a new chairman, Alex Blowers, who very kindly joins me now. Alex, thanks for talking to us. Let's just get straight to the nub of the matter. What made you want to take on this role?
Well, I think it's a hugely exciting time, is the first thing to say. It's an exciting time actually because I think the country's on a tipping point in terms of really now seeing investment flooding in to build out world-class digital infrastructure. And INCA and INCA's members are right at the tip of the spear point in that process. INCA members are mobilising huge amounts of capital and resources to start to build out the UK's full fibre infrastructure. And I think I'm really just delighted and flattered to have been asked to step up and really play a significant part in that for INCA.
Now, the government has quite an ambitious target for rollout. What do you think that altnets need to do to maximise their potential?
So I think first of all, I think it's a good thing that we have a challenging target. When I think back around the history of telecoms policy in recent years in this country, I think for a long time we were struggling with government lack of focus and indifference, really, about the gap that was emerging between the UK and other advanced economies in terms of our scale and ambition around putting in place new world-class full fibre infrastructure. That's all changed. That's really tremendous. And I think having a challenging stretch target of the kind that the government has put in place is super motivating for the industry. And I think it also helps to clarify the government's policies. Now, in terms of what INCA needs to do to fulfill its potential, the single most important aspect of that is delivery of this objective through a competitive market. So I think we all know from both what economic theory tells us, but more importantly, what bitter experience tells us, that if we're reliant on a single supplier that has a bunch of other stuff that it also needs to invest in and prioritize, that's not the recipe for really being on the front foot to achieve the target. INCA members are mobilizing huge amounts of capital. They're really on it. They're committed to delivering their share of this challenging target. And I think what's important really is that the government, and importantly the regulator Ofcom, just give them an opportunity, give them a level playing field on which to compete, and the ability to really have a crack at this.
Yes, so I mean, how important do you think the independent networks are to the delivery of what's now being called Gigabit Britain?
Well, I think if you add up all of the commitments that have already been made by investors now backing INCA members, we're looking at a commitment of up to £10 billion. So estimates vary as to how much it will actually cost to complete the rollout of full fibre across the country, but that's certainly up to a third of the total could be met just through the contributions that INCA members have already committed to. And I think if we get the right regulatory and policy environment, it won't stop there. I think INCA members will be prepared to go significantly further than that and make really substantial inroads into the target. And by the way, as a not insignificant byproduct, reduce our reliance on a kind of monopoly provider to achieve and to deliver our national full fibre platform. So that's important in and of itself. It's not just about hitting the target, but actually creating a much more healthy and vibrant competitive infrastructure market going forward.
How does INCA, support the altnets?
INCA has a really important role to play, in my view, really on two dimensions. First, I think altnets by their nature are entering the market through their own individual footprints. They've got their own individual business plans. They've got their own areas of focus. But there needs to be a collective voice really to make the case that I've just tried to make, which is collectively, this is a huge commitment to achieving the government's target, and finding that collective voice and that ability to synthesize the value of the contribution that individual INCA members are making and really hit home with that message that INCA members are invaluable and indispensable in this process seems to me to be super important. There's also, I think, a bunch of subsidiary things that INCA can do to help its members. And one of those is really about enabling the growth, scaling up, and potentially further down the line, the consolidation of the altnet sector. So there are shared challenges that all INCA members have. That's partly about finding ways to build at scale. It's also partly about finding ways to build networks that can be consumed by the ISPs. So I think INCA's got a very important role to be a kind of guiding light in that process, to enable the INCA members to scale and to be consumed at scale by the ISPs.
What are your sort of ambitions for your time as chairman? And how will you decide at the end, whether you were successful or not? What are you looking to achieve?
Well, I think we've got a really interesting year ahead in terms of the broader policy and regulatory environment. I think we've got a government that now clearly wants to press on with the steps that it can take to achieve its targets. Some of that is about subsidy of the hardest to reach parts of the country, what the government's calling its outside in programme. And some of it is about removing the remaining barriers or impediments to building at scale. So for instance, reforming the rules around gaining access to properties, so-called way leaves agreements. I think these are areas where I would measure success by, at the end of this year, at the end of 2021, are we really on the flight path? And are INCA members on board the plane on the flight path to deliver that 2025 goal? And that will require, I think, a process on the government subsidy programme that allows full participation by INCA members. And it will require real progress on those remaining barriers. And that one that I've called out around way leaves for me is a particularly important one there. I think the other one, which is more kind of, shall we say, a little bit more touchy-feely, but for me is really important, is the regulator having front and centre in its objectives, Ofcom having front and centre in its view of how the market will evolve, the contribution that the altnets will play. Because I think Ofcom is sometimes at risk of being overly focused, overly BT-centric in its outlook. That's understandable. If you spend all your working days and working lives really managing that relationship and imposing regulatory obligations on the monopoly incumbent, that tends to become your overwhelming focus. But I think INCA members generally would say, and I would endorse this view, that Ofcom needs now, I think, to really live the strategy that it's outlined, which is all about securing a competitive market structure. And the nature of the competition, the nature of the competitive threat that will deliver on that strategy is the INCA membership.
I'm asking you have a bit of a crystal ball view here. The digital infrastructure landscape, where do you see that ideally in, say, the next 10 years?
I personally am optimistic that the government will achieve much of what it has set out to do in its strategy. I think we will have a pretty much comprehensive coverage of full fibre by the end of the decade. I think there are some remaining questions about exactly how fast that can be done. You know, for a long time, we were all working towards 100% coverage target by 2025. That was really a major stretch target. So we were all in a sense enthused by the scale of the ambition, but slightly scared by the, if you like, the scale of the challenge. A bit daunted is probably the better way of putting it. I think by the end of the decade, though, all of the pieces can fall into place to get us pretty close to comprehensive coverage of gigabit-capable networks. And by the way, although the government uses that term gigabit-capable networks, to all intents and purposes, I believe that 99% of that will be achieved through rollouts of full fibre connections, because that's really the gold standard technology. I think then there are some really important questions of what that will deliver for the broader economy and society, because it's not an end in itself to create world-class infrastructure. We also then have to think about how people will use that infrastructure to maximum effect, both in our kind of private consumption and our social lives, but really more importantly in terms of its contribution to economic competitiveness and productivity. And what excites me actually is the way that the combination of world-class full fibre infrastructure, essentially no constraints on capacity in the fixed part of the network, and then the new possibilities opened up by advanced wireless technologies, 5G and beyond, what that can do in terms of transforming the way that we all live and work. We've all just emerged from, or are emerging chrysalis-like from our lockdown over the course of last year. Well, one thing that we've all learned, I think, is that the future is going to be much more of this kind of interaction that we're having right now. We need world-class infrastructure for that. And it won't stop there. I think what we'll find is whole new ways of working, whole new forms of innovation, of organising our lives, our workspaces, our environments, that at the moment we're really only just scratching the surface on. You know, a lot of what you hear from people is full fibre technology, gigabit capable technology would be great because you can download Netflix movies 3 times faster. You know, of all of the benefits, it's not a benefit, but it's probably one of the most trivial benefits in the overall scheme of things. You know, there's so much more that can be achieved once we have this world-class technology in place. So let's just get on with it.
Well, Alex, can I just say good luck in the new role? Thanks for joining us, and I'm sure it's going to be an exciting year ahead.